In this video, we're going to continue the conversation around pivot tables. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to format pivot tables and control their general appearance. You see this pivot table here, you might assume that it would behave like every other cell in Excel, but in many cases it will not. And knowing those rules will help you make you more effective, less frustrated, and just get better results more quickly for you and your clients. So for instance, we have sales data for different regions of the world for these different product lines. And if we want to control the number formatting of these cells, we want them to be currency, let's say dollars, we could select these cells and make that modification like we would any other cell in Excel. But we don't really want to do that. The best way to do it is to tell the pivot table that this particular value or field is supposed to be a dollar amount wherever it may be found, even if I make modifications to my pivot table. So I'm going to click on one cell, and I'm going to go to Value Field Settings, Number Format, Currency, remove the decimal places, and there you go. Now we've told the pivot table that this is dollars, and even if I make modifications, even if I add, let's say, years here, whatever I want to add, Excel knows that sales are in dollars. Now the only way that it will forget that is if I remove sales from pivot table fields down here. And if I add it back, it will not have remembered the formatting that I have done. I'll have to do that over again. So I'm just going to undo, keep it the way it was. The other thing you may have noticed while I was working is that the column widths were changing all about while I was working. So let me give you a more exaggerated example. I have the territory names, but I also have a longer version of those names in the original table. And you can see that because this territory name is so long and this is so short, these column widths are all over the place. And in many cases, and I don't think in any case you would want these column widths to be the way they are. You'd want them to be much more standardized. That's a more standardized way to see a table. This is a very strange way to see a table. Excel is just trying to be smart, but it's actually kind of annoying in some cases. So let's say we wanted to fix that. Well, we would fix that like we'd always fix it, right? We turn wrapping on, center it. We would make these less wide. We'd make this a little taller. We're almost there. Let me make this a little wider. Now we have a nice table that has a standard width for these for these names here. But you'll actually find that if I make any further modifications, the pivot table will keep updating. See? There it did it again. Now it's a little better. It retained my wrapping of text. It still is on 2 lines, so it's slightly better than before. But it still changed the width here to be much, much less wide, much, much narrower than the D column here. And all the column widths are a little bit different. They're all the, in quotes, right width rather, to fit just what's in them, which is not what I want. I want them to be standardized the way I left them. So to control that, I'm going to right-click and go to Pivot Table Options and unselect this option, AutoFit Column Widths on Update. That is pretty self-explanatory. This is a feature that Excel is doing that we almost always want to be off. When you turn it off, if I make modifications, let me set this again to whatever I want it to be. There you go. And if I add years here, you'll see that nothing happened. The widths stayed the way I wanted them to. I have much more control. That's the way it should be for this table here. The other thing you might want to do is you might want to add conditional formatting to a pivot table. It's a really common thing you might want. And you might do that by saying, oh, I'm just going to select a range here and add conditional formatting. And you can do that, but in many cases, almost instantly, that conditional formatting may vanish and just may not do what you want it to do. So the better way to go about it is you can go click on any cell in the area you want to conditionally format, and you can go to color scales, let's say, and right, you got that. That's pretty useless. But if I go under Manage Rules and say Edit Rules, oh, I just dragged this out of the range. Let me hold on a second. Let's do that again. Edit Rules, there it is. You can see that I can control, not as well as I'd like to, but I can still control where this conditional formatting is. So you can see it says all cells showing, so I can just have this conditional format applied at any place where there's sales, or I can have it any place where there's sales for that specific product line or territory. So let me try this one just to show you what it looks like. And I think it will not be what I want, but actually it is pretty great. So what it's done is it is conditionally formatted only basically this area And if I make modifications, it will continue to keep that conditional formatting with me. So you see it only is formatting that particular area. It's not formatting this new area. But even that is a plus. And you'll find if you've ever tried to use conditional formatting on a pivot table, a lot of times you make the slightest modification and all your formatting is all gone and it's all messed up. So this is kind of a very good way to do this. Let me try to add another one. Let's add slightly different scaling. Or let's just do icons. I just want to try something different just so I can see it more easily. I'm going to go to Manage. I'm going to control where it is. Okay. So let's try this guy here. Apply. So now you can see that this conditional formatting is appearing everywhere that there's a year and there's this, but not in the subheader. So you can see that basically Excel has islanded out these different areas in your pivot table, and you can apply different conditional formats, and as long as you sort of experiment and use those rules, you'll find that you can get what you want. Just to show you the other example, let me get rid of both of these. I think that should apply to all of it. Yes, good. If I add a new rule, let's say I add this again, and I think if I use the other setting, what will happen is it will just apply to the whole thing indiscriminately. Let's confirm that. If I do sales wherever they appear, the first option there, and I apply, yeah. This is a lot less helpful because if you have, especially if you have grand totaling going on, it will just, these will be huge spikes and these will be, really, really red and these will be really, really green. Not as helpful. That second option is much, much more helpful because it's only putting it in the same kind of islands, logical islands where it would go. So you can see now it stayed in the places where you'd expect it to. You probably don't have complete control over it the way you might if you just started selecting cells, but you have a lot of control over it, and that is definitely the way to go, especially if you're planning on making literally any modifications at all to your pivot table. Okay, I'm going to remove that formatting for the moment. Great. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was just how to control the look of the pivot table. You'll notice pivot tables always have this baby blue look to them. It's always white and a light blue. But what if we wanted to control how they look? What if we wanted to use a different format? Well, you probably have maybe tried, if you ever played around with pivot tables, to just select the cells that you want to change and just sort of start applying things. And you could definitely do that. But what you'll find is that it's not really the best way to go. Sometimes that formatting will disappear if you change your pivot table too much, or it will alter in unattractive ways, and you'll find you just have not as much control as you want in those situations. So the best way to do it is to get a little more comfortable with this design tab and these pivot table styles. Now, what I don't mean is just using one of these styles. You could definitely do that if one of these styles suits your fancy or is what you're looking for. That's totally fine. But what you'll find is sometimes you want to really control what it looks like, have a lot more just direction over the appearance, and what you can do that here by just creating a new style. You can see I already have one here, a custom one from earlier that I made when I was experimenting with this. But I'm just going to click on New Pivot Table Style, and let's say I wanted the whole pivot table to have a slightly different color, like a slight gray, very, very light gray. Let's say I wanted that top header. And you'll notice you have a long list of different options here, and some of them can be very confusing and it's not clear what they are. I recommend playing around with them and experimenting. We got the header row. This is this part up here. So I'm going to select Format, and I'm going to make this a dark blue. I'm going to make the font a white color, which really will pop on that blue. You can see it's sort of previewed up here. Unfortunately, it doesn't preview here. You have to just sort of go with this as best as you can. And I'm going to hit OK. And you see nothing happened, and the reason nothing happened is because I didn't apply it. So I'm going to click here and apply. I'm going to right click here again. I'm going to modify, and then what I'm going to do is look for what I want is for these headers up here to be a different color to sort of make those stand out a little more. So it's not going to be the subtotal row, even though these are subtotals. There are subtotals at the top of an area here. If I had them at the bottom, that's what this would be. What I want is row subheading, first one. And it says first because if you had multiple nested things, you can format up to 3 of them, a different color. So I'm going to fill these to be just another blue color, and I'm going to make the font a bold because I think that would look more attractive. I'm going to OK. You notice it still didn't update. I'm going to hit OK. Now it updated. Now you can see that the product lines really pop, and you have a lot more just visual clarity here. I could go ahead and make this grand total a different color if I wanted to. And I could also flip these. If I flip the order, the formatting will logically go with the new header. So it won't be like, it's not like this blue is locked to product lines. This blue is locked to the first sort of header for these subheaders. So if I change it, now this is the first header, and now these are the subheaders, are the ones below it. Okay, great. Now you can imagine with this, with the conditional formatting rules, with controlling the column widths, you have all the tools you need to really control how pivot tables look. The last thing I wanted to mention in this video is how to control situations where there's a blank in the data, where there really isn't any data. Now in this case, by default, Excel will just put a blank, and in many cases that's probably the best look. But what if you wanted to put something else there? What if you obviously can't type something in there. So what you would need to do is you would just go to the pivot table options and see here for empty cells show, and it shows a blank. What I could do is put a 0 here, hit OK, and now it will put a 0 where there's a blank. Great. Thank you so much for joining us for this video, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of this series. I'm going to really dig into pivot tables and explore other just really important things about pivot tables, how to really use them effectively in any setting, and how to get the most out of them. Please subscribe, and please join us for the next video in the series.